Dear listener, I write romance novels in the quiet of my night shifts. This one is about a woman called Mara and the long way round. She's a primary school teacher on the Sapphire coast of New South Wales. The sea there runs a particular shade of green that surprises people the first time they see it. Mara came for 1 year and stayed for 5. She bought a house. She has a dog. She'll tell you if you ask that her life is full and she isn't waiting for anything. Then a structural engineer named Tom arrived on a short-term contract, and they both reached for the same book at the Saturday market, and the woman selling it said something neither of them has forgotten. He came from Perth. He had a life there and a job waiting, and he'd always gone back. I want to tell you what happened. Mara's town sat on a stretch of coast where the cliffs were rust-coloured and the sea was green. She had come on a year's contract to teach at the local primary school and stayed because the school kept her and the town felt right. At the end of her 3rd year, she bought a weatherboard cottage 2 streets from the water. The garden was completely overgrown when she moved in. It's mostly under control now. Mostly. Her dog was named Biscuit. He went everywhere Mara went and a number of places he wasn't supposed to. On Friday evenings, she had dinner at her friend Claire's house. On Saturday mornings, she went to the market at the beach near the headland. On Sunday afternoons, she read until the light went. She knew the names of all her students' parents and most of their grandparents. On the last day of school each year, she wrote a handwritten card for every child in her class. She was content. She would say that plainly to anyone who asked. She wasn't waiting, she was here. The Saturday market ran behind the beach with the sea below and a coffee cart at the edge that smelled of freshly roasted beans. Mara had been stopping at the bookstall for 3 years. The woman who ran it was named Pam. Green sun hat every week without fail. She sorted her books by instinct rather than genre and knew every title in the place. Mara spotted a slim hardback with a blue spine on the table and reached for it. Another hand arrived at exactly the same moment. She looked up. The man looking back at her was tall and still. He had the book. "Sorry," he said. He didn't give it back. Pam looked at them both over the top of her glasses. "You'll have to work something out. There's only the one. It just came in this morning. Someone left it in a holiday house." She paused. "It's a book about choosing the harder thing because it's the right thing." She went back to her unpacking and left them to it. What Mara did not know was that Tom had been looking for a reason to talk to someone for weeks. They bought the book together, split the $4, and tossed a coin on the edge of Pam's table for who read it first. Tom won. They had coffee at the cart. He was in town on a contract, he said. 3 or 4 months. He moved around for work, different projects, different places, and when each one finished, he went back to Perth. He said it easily, the way you mention something that has never been a problem. She heard it and filed it away without examining it. She told him about her classroom, about the particular satisfaction of watching a child learn to read, and he asked her what that looked like, the actual moment it happened, and she found herself trying to describe something she'd never put into words before. He listened the way careful people listen, like he was going to remember it. By the time the market packed up around them, they had been talking for an hour and a half. She walked home along the headland path with Biscuit and found she was still mid-conversation in her head, finishing sentences, adding things she'd forgotten to say. He left the book in her letterbox the following Thursday with a note tucked inside the front cover. She chose right. I think she did anyway. What do you reckon? She read it twice. Then she walked around to his flat on the waterfront and knocked on his door. He had a pot of tea on the go and 2 mugs out, which she noticed and didn't comment on. They sat at his kitchen table and argued about the ending for an hour in the good-natured way of people who are, in fact, agreeing with each other. She walked home in the dark and realised she was smiling and had been for a while without noticing. After that, summer went the way the best ones do. Saturday coffee at the market, which became the part of Saturday she looked forward to most. Wednesday evenings on the beach path with Biscuit running ahead of them and the sun going down behind the cliffs, and Tom asking her things about the town she'd never thought to ask herself. Why did she stay? What surprised her most about the place after 5 years? What she'd thought her life would look like when she was a child, and how close it was to this. Tom started coming to Claire's pub quiz on Thursdays and contributed an unreasonable amount to the sport and engineering categories, and sat with his beer and laughed along with everyone. Mara's friends liked him. He liked them. The town absorbed him quietly, the way it absorbed most things. One evening at the pub quiz, someone asked Tom how long he was in town for. He said until May and smiled and went back to his beer. Mara heard it from across the table. Claire glanced at her. Mara looked at her drink. She didn't think about it after that. Or she did, but only briefly, and then she put it down. It was November. It was a long way from May. She noticed, around March, that she had stopped noticing his absence on the days they didn't see each other, because the days they didn't see each other had become quite rare. She noticed that too, briefly, and then she let it go. Nothing dramatic about any of it. That was, perhaps, the point. She was glad. She let herself be glad without pulling it apart. She didn't let herself think too hard about why that gladness had a particular quality now, held carefully, like something she didn't want to jostle. It was in early April, when the last of the summer visitors had gone and the town had settled back into itself, that Tom told Mara his contract was ending in May. It was a Tuesday. They were at the pub on the main street, their usual table, their usual orders, and Tom had been talking, and she'd been half listening and half watching his hands when he explained something, which was a thing she'd started doing without meaning to. And then, in between the main course and the end of the meal, he said it. The report was nearly finished. He'd go back to Perth when it was submitted. She said, "That's soon." He agreed that it was. They looked at each other, something big unsaid between them. The food was finished. They sat with it for a moment. Then one of them said something ordinary, and the evening continued. And that was in some ways the hardest part. After that, the ease between them got careful. Tom was working longer hours. He was still there at the Tuesday dinners, but quieter. The way a person gets when they've started preparing for something in their mind before they have to do it with their body. She didn't push. She wasn't someone who pushed. He had a life in Perth, 12 years of one, a firm that knew him, a city that fit him. She let him be. She was okay. She told herself she was okay. But was she? They went to the Easter markets and he bought her a print of a kookaburra in the she oak. She put it on her kitchen wall, in the spot she'd been meaning to fill for 2 years. Neither of them said anything about that. On the first Saturday of May, Tom found her at Pam's stall. He had the look of a man who'd rehearsed something. His flights were booked for Thursday. There was a project waiting in Perth, a big one, the kind he'd been working toward for years. It was good news. He was pleased. He hoped she could hear that. She could. She said, "Tom, that's wonderful." And she meant it. Both the congratulation and the grief of it at the same moment, which is harder than it sounds. He held her for a moment, there in the market crowd, with the coffee and the salt and the she oaks at their backs. Then he said he still had boxes to pack. And she said, of course. And they said goodbye the way two people do when neither of them is going to make a scene at a Saturday market. She went home. She made tea. Biscuit settled against her legs on the couch. She opened a book and read for 3 hours. It was a good afternoon. She was okay. She was. So you think there'll be a happy ending to this romance? Maybe, maybe not. I promise it's worth staying for though. And make sure you're subscribed. Tom's younger sister Jodie arrived 4 days before his flight. Duffel bag, large energy, no graceful entrance. She was 29, a paramedic in Perth, and nothing like her brother in temperament, which meant she could see him clearly. She got Mara's number from Tom's phone without asking him and called on the Wednesday morning. Said she needed someone to show her the good coffee. Mara took her to the cart at the beach and they sat on the bench above the water with flat whites. Jodie looked at the sea. Then she said, He's been here 10 weeks and you're the only person he's actually talked to. He talks about you the way he talks about engineering things like bridges. And we know how much he likes bridges. Mara didn't know what to say to that. Jody didn't seem to need a response. Beautiful here, she said. She finished her coffee. Tom flew on the Thursday. Mara had school and 26 children who needed things from her all morning, so she didn't have much time to think. He sent a message from the airport. She wrote back, "Safe travels." She looked at the words before she sent them. They were accurate and insufficient. She sent them anyway. 3 weeks later, he called on a Sunday evening. She was on the couch with Biscuit and a book. The phone lit up on the cushion beside her. She picked it up and looked at his name on the screen. She let it ring twice more. Then she set it face down and waited until it stopped. She sent a message after. "Sorry, missed this, hope you're well." He replied, "All good." She didn't let herself think too hard about why she'd done it. She was fine. She was busy. She was getting on with things. She found the book in June, the slim hardback with the blue spine, sitting in her bedside stack where it had been since March. She opened it without any particular intention, and it fell open to a page she'd marked without remembering why. The line read, "She had been afraid. Not of losing things, but of wanting them too much." She sat with that for a long time. Outside, the winter was off the sea and the days were short. Biscuit was asleep at the end of the bed. The house was quiet in the way it was always quiet when she was the only person in it, which she had never minded before, and was minding now. She thought about the Sunday call. She thought about the message she'd nearly sent and deleted instead. She had been doing something very specific she understood now, making sure she couldn't lose something by never quite reaching for it. She had been calling that caution. She understood now that it was fear, and that fear had cost her a great deal, and that it did not have to cost her anymore. It was a Monday evening. She ate dinner, washed up, sat at the kitchen table. She was going about things methodically, almost automatically. The kookaburra print was on the wall in front of her. She looked at it for a moment, and she decided. She picked up the phone and called him, and he answered on the second ring. She told him she'd let his call go to voicemail in May, and she'd been thinking about why. She read him the passage from the book, which she wouldn't normally do, but she'd decided on the way to the phone that normally hadn't been working for her. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he'd been afraid of something similar, that he'd been returning to Perth for 12 years because returning was what he did, that staying somewhere felt like admitting you'd stopped imagining other possibilities. Mara said, "But what if it's the opposite?" He said, Yeah, I've been thinking about that." They talked for hours. Nothing was settled at the end of it. But they'd said the things that needed saying, and that was its own kind of solid ground. He came back in August. Not to move, just to see. They both understood that just to see was doing a lot of work in that sentence. He flew across the country from Perth to Sydney, then drove 6 hours south. He arrived at her door at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon with a bag and the look of someone who has made a decision. She opened the door, and they both smiled at exactly the same moment, which settled something. He looked at her the way people look when they've been carrying an image of someone in their head, and the real person is better. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. They wrapped each other up in a long kiss on the doorstep, with the afternoon light coming in off the water and Biscuit going mad around their feet. They spent the rest of the afternoon getting to know each other again, the way you do when you've been careful with each other for too long. By the time the light went, the carefulness was gone. They walked the beach at sunset, holding hands, with Biscuit running ahead of them. After a while, Tom said he'd been thinking about the Perth project, that he could structure significant parts of it remotely. She said, "You don't have to do that for me." He said, "I know, I want to. That's different." She looked at the water. Then she said, "Yes, it is." He stayed a fortnight. On the last day, he didn't drive back to Sydney. The Perth project proved more workable remotely than Tom had expected. His firm cared about what he produced, not where he produced it. He went back in September to pack up the flat and see his family, and Mara went with him. She had never been to Perth. She stood in his flat on the first morning while he sorted boxes and thought about all the years of his life that had happened before she knew him. Jody drove them both to the airport when it was time. In the car park, while Tom was loading the last of the bags, Jody looked at Mara and said, "I'm glad I called you." Mara said, "So am I." Jody nodded. They smiled appreciatively. That was the whole conversation. They both knew, and sometimes that's enough. By December, Tom had been in the town long enough that Pam at the bookstall knew his tastes and set things aside for him. In Mara's reckoning, that was the real measure of belonging somewhere. It was a Saturday morning. Tourist season starting again, the sea back to its emerald green after a grey winter. Pam had a book on coastal engineering history she'd saved for Tom. Mara was sorting through a tray of old postcards for her classroom. Biscuit was sitting on Tom's boot, which was what he did when he found a situation satisfactory. They bought their things. They had coffee at the cart, where the woman on Saturday mornings now started making their orders when she saw them coming. The morning opened around them. Tourists arriving in their cars below. The she-oaks moving in the offshore breeze. The kookaburras laughing in the distance. The path above the water ahead of them. The same one Mara had walked every Saturday for 5 years. It felt, this morning, like exactly the right number. Dear listener, I wrote that story on a night shift in June. The ending came quickly, which is sometimes how it goes. What I wanted to write was two people who were both genuinely good at their own lives, who had to get out of their own way before they could build one together. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to Easy Australian English for new stories and leave me a comment below. If you were Mara, would you have answered that Sunday call? Every comment is a chance to practice your English, and I read every single one.